My brother shamed me in front of the entire family for not having kids yet, telling me I was selfish and incomplete. But what I did next left him speechless and forced him to apologize in a way he would regret for the rest of his life. My name is Jenna, and for the longest time, I never understood why family gatherings felt like a battlefield. It's not that my family was anything out of the ordinary. Sure, they had their quirks, their ups and downs. But there was one thing I never quite could escape: the constant pressure about my personal life. And most of that pressure came from my brother, Alex. Alex is the kind of person who always had everything figured out. He was married by the time he was 25, had two kids by 30, and lived this perfect suburban life that looked like it came straight out of a family magazine. He was proud of it, too. Too proud. So proud, in fact, that he often couldn't help but comment on anyone else's life choices, especially when they didn't align with his idea of normal. I was 32 and I'd never been married. I had no kids, but it didn't mean I hadn't thought about it. I was successful in my career, had a fulfilling social life, and was focused on the things that mattered to me. Still, no matter how hard I worked to build a life I was happy with, Alex always found a way to bring up the topic of children at family gatherings. It happened again at our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner. We were all gathered around the table, laughing and sharing stories, when my brother decided it was time to turn the spotlight on me. "So, Jenna," Alex began, his voice just a little too loud for comfort, "when are you going to stop being so selfish and have a kid? I mean, you've been talking about it for years. What's the holdup?" My face instantly flushed with heat. I could feel every pair of eyes at the table slowly shifting towards me. My mom looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting back and forth between me and Alex, unsure of whether to intervene. My dad didn't say anything, his face frozen with that same unreadable expression that usually meant he was tuning out the conversation. The rest of the family was quiet, waiting for my response. I had heard this question before, over and over again. It wasn't new, but something about the way Alex said it this time, so bluntly, so publicly, hit differently. It felt like a personal attack, like he had been waiting for the perfect moment to make me the subject of his judgment. "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice steady though my heart was pounding. "Alex, I'm not selfish because I choose not to have kids. My life, my choices are my own." The table fell completely silent. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention on me, and I knew exactly what was coming next. My brother always had this way of making you feel small in front of the family. He never cared how his words affected others. He always assumed his choices were the right ones, and anyone who disagreed, well, they were just wrong. "Oh, please, Jenna," Alex scoffed, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. "You know it's not normal for someone your age to still be childless. You've spent your whole life working, traveling, and doing whatever you want. But what happens when you're older? Who's going to take care of you?" The audacity, the sheer arrogance of his words stunned me. There was a part of me that wanted to shut down, to avoid this confrontation and let the evening go by like any other Thanksgiving. But I knew that I couldn't let him get away with this, not this time. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of everyone there, my cousins, my aunts, even my mom. They were all waiting to see what I would say. Would I back down just like I had in the past? Or would I finally stand up for myself? "I'm not living my life for anyone else," I said, my voice sharper now. "I don't need to have kids to feel fulfilled, Alex. I don't need to follow your blueprint of life to be happy." For a split second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, like he hadn't expected me to fight back, but just as quickly his smug expression returned. "Well, I just think it's a little sad that you don't want a family of your own," he said, leaning forward. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your career, you'd understand that having kids is the most important thing you can do." At that moment, something inside me snapped. This was it. I was done. I had let Alex's judgment slide too many times, and now, in front of my entire family, he was pushing me too far. But what I didn't expect was that my response wouldn't just make him shut up, it would change everything. "What's sad, Alex?" I said coldly, standing up from my chair, "is that you think having kids is the only way to find purpose in life. You're right, I don't have kids, and I'm not sure I ever will." But that doesn't mean my life is any less meaningful than yours. I've built a career I love, I've built relationships that matter, and I've learned to find fulfillment in ways you could never understand. And I'm happy. I paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence that followed. Everyone was still staring at me. Even Alex had gone quiet. But here's the real kicker, I continued, now looking directly at my brother. The real reason I don't have kids isn't because I don't want them. It's because I've watched you and seen how unhappy you are in your perfect little life, how trapped you feel, how resentful you are when your kids demand attention, how stressed out you are trying to juggle it all. You've made having kids seem like this dream, but all I see is a nightmare of regret. Alex's face went pale. I could see the words hit him like a punch to the gut. But I wasn't done yet. So before you shame me in front of the family for not having kids, maybe you should take a good look at your own life and ask yourself if it's as perfect as you want everyone to think. There was a long, heavy silence. And then, for the first time in years, I saw Alex, the golden child of the family, the one who was always right, look down in shame. I had finally given him a taste of his own medicine. But the best part? That was only the beginning of the lesson I was about to teach him. The room was still, no one spoke. For a long moment I stood there, the weight of my words hanging in the air, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel the shock radiating from my family. No one had ever really challenged Alex before, especially not in front of everyone. But I had done it, and in that moment, I knew I had made my point. Alex, who had always been the center of attention, the one who everyone turned to for advice, looked completely rattled. He sat there staring at his plate, unsure of what to say or do next. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that resembled guilt. It was the first time I had ever seen him look like he didn't have the answers. My mom, bless her heart, tried to break the silence. "Jenna, maybe we should just—" She trailed off, not sure if she should intervene or let it be. I could see her shifting uncomfortably, caught between her loyalty to her son and the realization that I had a valid point. But I wasn't going to back down. I had said what needed to be said. For too long, I had let Alex make me feel inadequate, like my choices were wrong because they didn't match his. For too long, I had swallowed my frustration, pretending his judgment didn't hurt. But this time, I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for every single woman in the family who had been made to feel less than because of their own life choices. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice much quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't mean it like that, Jenna." His words were sincere, but there was an edge of defensiveness. "I was just trying to, push you to think about your future. You always talk about how great your life is, but it's not complete without a family. At least that's what I thought." His justification was weak, but it wasn't completely unexpected. Alex had always been the kind of person who believed his way was the only right way. It didn't matter what anyone else wanted, as long as it fit into his ideal of what life should look like. I could see now that he genuinely thought he was helping me, but his approach had been all wrong, and his comment about my life not being complete? It stung more than I cared to admit, but I had already put my cards on the table, and I wasn't going to let him take back the power he had lost so easily. "Alex," I said calmly, my voice steady, "you don't get to decide what complete looks like for me. I am complete. I've built a life I'm proud of, and just because it doesn't fit into your narrow little view of happiness doesn't make it any less valid." He was quiet again, not sure how to respond. It was the first time I had ever seen him at a loss for words. And it felt good. I had spent years, too many years, feeling like I had to live up to his version of success. But in that moment, I realized something. My life wasn't defined by his standards, and I didn't need anyone's approval, least of all his. My aunt, who had been sitting quietly, cleared her throat. "Well, that was intense," she said, trying to lighten the mood. But there was a note of respect in her voice that I hadn't expected. Alex wasn't just the golden boy of the family. He was the one everyone admired, the one whose opinion everyone valued. But now, for the first time, I could feel a shift. It wasn't just me standing up to him. It was everyone in the room watching him squirm, witnessing for themselves that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't always right. Alex glanced at the table, his face flushed with embarrassment. Look, I'm sorry, Jenna. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I don't get it, okay? I see how happy I am with my family, and I want that for you, too. But I guess I didn't realize how much I was pushing you. I could see that he was trying, but it wasn't enough. Not this time. Not when he had publicly made me feel like I wasn't enough for not having kids. I appreciate the apology, but it's not just about the words, I said firmly. It's about respect. And respect means not trying to dictate other people's lives just because they don't fit your idea of perfect. He nodded, looking like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure what else to add. For the first time, I saw my brother, this man who always had a ready answer for everything, admit that maybe he didn't know it all. And honestly, that was more powerful than any apology he could have given. The rest of the dinner continued in a strange, awkward silence. The mood had shifted, and no one seemed to know how to ease the tension. The once lively conversation had turned into a series of nervous glances and hesitant words. But for me, it didn't matter. I had said what I needed to say, and I wasn't backing down. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let Alex, or anyone, take it from me. That evening, as the family started to filter out, I caught Alex by the door. He was still quiet, avoiding eye contact. Hey, I said softly, stepping in front of him. I want you to understand something. He met my eyes, finally looking at me with the sincerity I had hoped for. What? I'm not upset about your opinion, I said, choosing my words carefully. I'm upset because you made me feel less than in front of everyone. You embarrassed me, Alex, and I'm not the only one you've done that to. So don't think that just because you're married with kids, that your way is the only way. I'm happy with my choices. I'm happy with my life. And if you ever try to shame me for that again, you'll regret it. He stood there, speechless, nodding slowly. For the first time, I saw the respect in his eyes that I had always wanted from him. I get it, Jenna, he said quietly. I do. And with that, I knew I had made my point. Alex had learned the hard way that you don't shame people for their choices. Not anymore. Not in my family. Not when I had finally found my voice. The days following Thanksgiving were quieter than usual. Alex tried to reach out a few times, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook just yet. He sent me a few texts, apologizing again, telling me how much he regretted his words, and even tried to make small talk over the phone. But I wasn't interested in hearing empty apologies. I had made it clear that the apology wasn't enough. He needed to show me that he respected me, my choices, and the boundaries I had finally set. Words alone weren't going to cut it this time. What surprised me the most, though, was the reaction from the rest of the family. My aunt, who had been the first to break the silence at the dinner table, called me a few days later. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you, Jenna, she said, her voice soft. I've seen how Alex has always made you feel less than. It's been hard to watch. I don't know if I would have had the courage to speak up like you did, but I'm glad you did. You deserved that respect, and I think we all needed to see you stand up for yourself. I was taken aback by her words. I hadn't realized how much the rest of the family had silently watched Alex's behavior and how it had affected me. It wasn't just Alex who had made me feel small over the years. It was everyone who had stood by and let it happen. I wasn't just taking back my power from him, but from everyone who had ever made me feel like I wasn't enough because I wasn't following their perfect life path. The phone call with my aunt was just the beginning. Over the next week, I received messages from other family members, cousins, a few friends from high school, even my mom, telling me how proud they were of me for standing up to Alex. It felt good, but it also felt strange. For so long, I had been the one who kept my head down, avoided confrontation, and tried to keep the peace. And yet all of a sudden, I was the one everyone looked to as an example of strength. It made me realize just how much I had been undervaluing myself all these years. All because I thought I had to fit into some mold that didn't align with who I was. All because I thought I needed validation from someone else. Someone who was always ready to tear me down and make himself feel better. But not anymore. I wasn't playing by anyone's rules but my own. The real breakthrough came when Alex finally came to see me in person. It was a week after the Thanksgiving dinner, and I had almost forgotten about his apology attempts. But there he was, standing at my doorstep, looking far more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. His usual cocky attitude was gone. He was nervous, unsure of himself. "Jenna," he began, "I know I messed up. I've been thinking about what you said, about what I did, and I know it wasn't just what I said, but how I made you feel. I'm sorry for being so selfish, for thinking that I had the right to judge your life and your choices." I nodded, but I didn't invite him in right away. I was letting the weight of his words sink in. "I don't want to make excuses, but I think I've been projecting a lot of my own insecurities onto you," he continued, his voice quieter now. "I've always been the one who followed the right path, the one everyone looked up to, and I guess I just assumed that was the only way to live. I didn't understand why you were choosing a different path, and that made me angry, I guess. But that's my problem, not yours." He paused, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he began speaking. "I was wrong, Jenna. You've always done things your way, and that's something I should have respected. I'm really sorry for making you feel like you were failing, for making you feel less than. I want to be better, for you, for myself, and for our family." The sincerity in his voice hit me hard. Alex had always been so sure of himself, so convinced that he knew what was best for everyone. But here he was, admitting he was wrong. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had made him see me, not just as his younger sister, but as an equal. "I appreciate the apology," I said, my voice steady but soft. "But this isn't just about saying sorry, it's about respecting each other's choices. I've spent so many years trying to meet your expectations and feeling like I wasn't good enough because my life didn't look like yours. But I'm done with that. I'm not going to let you, or anyone else, make me feel less than because my life doesn't fit your idea of perfection." Alex nodded, his face reflecting a mixture of regret and understanding. "I get it now. I really do. I've been blind to a lot of things, and I want to make it right. I promise I won't try to change you again." I smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you, Alex. That's all I've ever wanted, to be respected for who I am, not who you think I should be." He stepped forward, finally stepping into the threshold of the door. "Can we start over?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "I don't want this to be a wedge between us anymore." I thought about it for a moment. This was the moment of truth. I could forgive him, but it had to be on my terms. I had to know that this wasn't just an apology to make himself feel better. He had to show me that he understood, that he had learned something. I wasn't going to be the sister who always took the back seat in our relationship anymore. "We can start over," I said, taking a deep breath, "but this time it has to be different. We have to treat each other with the respect we both deserve." Alex smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly on the same page. I had stood up for myself. I had made Alex realize that his version of life wasn't the only valid one, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my own sense of worth. No one, no matter who they were, would ever make me feel like I wasn't enough again. Over the next few weeks, I saw a real shift in my relationship with Alex. It wasn't instant and it wasn't easy, but the difference was undeniable. The casual jabs, the unsolicited advice, and the constant pressure to live life on his terms, everything I had been subjected to for years, began to fade. It wasn't just about him apologizing, though. It was about him actually listening to me, respecting my boundaries, and accepting that my life choices were valid, even if they didn't fit his blueprint of success. The first few conversations we had after the Thanksgiving dinner were awkward. There were moments where he still tried to offer unsolicited advice, but now, when he did, I was quick to shut it down. One evening, he called me to check in, and the conversation started with, "Have you thought about going on a date lately? I really think you'd be happier if you just tried dating again." I could feel the familiar irritation building up, but this time, I had the tools to handle it. I wasn't going to let him push me into a box I didn't belong in. "Alex," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm, "I'm not unhappy because I'm single. I'm not unhappy at all. I'm content with my life, and that's enough. Please stop trying to fix something that isn't broken." There was a pause on the other end of the line. For once, he didn't argue. He didn't try to convince me that I was missing out or that I should be doing something different. Instead, he simply said, "Okay, I hear you. I just want you to be happy, Jenna. I'm sorry for all the times I made you feel like you weren't enough." And for the first time, I felt like he meant it. There was no defensiveness in his voice, no attempt to justify his actions. He had heard me, truly heard me, and it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had never realized how much I had been carrying, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. The weeks that followed were transformative. Our conversations grew deeper, more thoughtful. We began to share our thoughts without judgment, and instead of trying to change each other, we focused on supporting one another. He even stopped making comments about my career or personal life. No more unsolicited advice about relationships or children. He was finally respecting my decisions, and in turn, I found myself respecting him more than I had in years. But the real turning point came when we decided to spend a weekend together, just the two of us. It wasn't a big family gathering or an event where we had to pretend everything was fine. It was just us. We rented a cabin by a lake away from the chaos of our lives. There we had the space to talk about everything that had happened. Our childhood, the family dynamics, and the things we had never addressed because we were too busy trying to live up to expectations. We spent the weekend hiking, cooking meals together, and talking for hours by the fire. I was surprised by how much we had in common, how much we had missed in our conversations over the years, simply because we had been too focused on trying to prove we were right. It was during one of these long talks that Alex finally admitted something that I hadn't expected. "You know," he said, sitting back in his chair and staring out at the lake, "I've always been the one everyone looks to for answers, but honestly, I've been pretending for a long time. I thought I had to have everything figured out to be happy. I thought I had to follow a certain path, marriage, kids, the whole deal. But when I really think about it, I've spent most of my life doing things because I thought I was supposed to, not because I wanted to. I thought I had to be this perfect role model, but I've realized that I'm not perfect and maybe that's okay." I looked at him, surprised by his admission. Alex had always prided himself on being the perfect one in the family, the one who followed all the rules and did everything by the book. To hear him admit that he had been living for other people's approval was eye-opening. "I've been guilty of doing the same thing," I said softly. "I spent so much time trying to fit into your version of success that I lost sight of what I wanted. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was letting your expectations become my own." Alex smiled, a real smile, the kind that was free of guilt or shame. "I guess we've both been trying to live up to the wrong things, but I think we're finally figuring it out." That weekend was a turning point in more ways than one. We didn't just reconnect as siblings, we learned how to really listen to each other. I was no longer trying to prove anything to him, and he was no longer trying to change me. It wasn't about fixing each other or living up to some ideal. It was about understanding, respect, and accepting that our lives were our own to live. When we returned from the trip, I could feel a shift in the family dynamic. Alex no longer hovered over me with his advice or judgments. He had finally stopped seeing me as someone to fix, and I didn't feel the need to prove myself to him anymore. We had both grown, and the tension between us had evaporated. That's when I realized the most important thing: standing up for myself, challenging Alex's assumptions, and demanding respect had not only changed our relationship, but it had also changed me. I had learned how to assert myself, to value my own choices, and to not let anyone, especially my brother, make me feel less than. The true victory wasn't just in Alex apologizing, it was in the way he began to treat me differently, the way our relationship evolved into something based on equality and understanding. But the biggest lesson of all? I didn't need anyone to define my happiness for me. I was enough, just as I was, and that, I realized, was the most powerful thing I could ever learn. As time passed, the change in my relationship with Alex wasn't just noticeable between the two of us. It spread through the entire family. For years, I had been the one who felt judged, who felt like I had to live up to some invisible standard. But now, it wasn't just Alex who had learned something about respect. It was everyone around us. The first sign that things were shifting came at Christmas. We were all gathered at my mom's house, the usual mix of family chatter and holiday cheer. The dynamic was different this year. Instead of the usual comments about my single life and the lack of kids, the conversation flowed without the undertones of judgment. Alex wasn't pushing the "when are you going to settle down" narrative, and neither was anyone else. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't under constant scrutiny. My mom, who had always been the one to subtly pressure me, pulled me aside for a quiet moment after dinner. I could see the change in her, too. She didn't look at me with that look of concern she always had when she'd bring up marriage and children. "Jenna," she began hesitantly, "I just want to say that I see a difference in you this year. You've always been a strong woman, but I think you've really found your voice. I'm proud of you for standing up to Alex like you did. I didn't realize how much pressure he had been putting on you, and I'm sorry for that." I was stunned. My mom had always been the one to subtly suggest I should be doing more with my life, that I should be finding a partner and having children, just like everyone else in the family. To hear her admit that she had been part of the problem and to apologize for it was more than I had ever expected. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice soft but sincere. "It means a lot to me that you're seeing things differently. I just want to live my life on my terms. I don't need anyone else's approval." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just Alex who needed to change, it was the family dynamic that had been built around these unspoken expectations. I was no longer the black sheep, the one who didn't fit into the mold. I was being seen for who I truly was. But the most surprising conversation came later that evening when I found myself sitting next to my cousin, Rachel. Rachel and I had always been close, but we had drifted apart over the years, mainly because of the unspoken divide between our life choices. She was married with 2 kids, living a life that everyone in the family admired. I had always felt like the odd one out. "So, Jenna," she said, breaking the silence between us, "I have to admit, I've been thinking a lot about what happened between you and Alex. I didn't really get it at first, but now I see it differently. I've been struggling with this idea of having it all. People always say how happy I must be with my family and kids, but it's been hard. It's not as easy as everyone makes it seem. Sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions." I stared at her, surprised. Rachel had always been the picture of the perfect life, always posting about her happy marriage and her kids on social media, always seeming like she had everything together. To hear her admit that it wasn't as perfect as it looked was eye-opening. "I think we all have different ideas of what makes us happy," I said carefully. "For me, it's not about following anyone else's expectations. I've learned that the pressure to have kids and settle down doesn't fit into the life I want, and I don't want to regret living someone else's version of happiness." She nodded slowly, looking pensive. "I think I need to hear that. I've been so focused on what everyone else thinks about my life that I forgot to check in with myself. You've always been true to yourself, Jenna, and I think I've been hiding behind the idea of what people expect from me." It felt like a full-circle moment. Rachel, the cousin I had always admired for her perfect life, was admitting that maybe she wasn't as happy as she seemed. That maybe, just maybe, we all had different definitions of happiness. And that was okay. By the end of the night, there was an air of quiet understanding that hung over the table. My family wasn't perfect, far from it. But there was a shift in how we saw each other. The judgments and expectations that had once defined us were slowly being replaced with a deeper respect for each other's choices. I left the holiday gathering feeling lighter, more at peace. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. I had stood up for my own happiness, and in doing so, I had shown my family that there was no one right way to live life. We were all on our own journeys, and that was something worth celebrating. As I walked to my car, I thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. It wasn't just about Alex's apology or the way the family had shifted their expectations. It was about me reclaiming my power, my voice, and my right to live my life on my terms. And that was just the beginning. The ripple effect of standing up for myself hadn't just impacted Alex, it had impacted the entire family. And if there was anything I had learned through all of this, it was that when you stop living for others and start living for yourself, everything changes. In the end, I wasn't just teaching Alex a lesson. I was teaching everyone that happiness comes from embracing your own choices, not conforming to anyone else's. And for the first time, I truly believed that I had the power to shape my own destiny. The weeks that followed felt like a new chapter in my life, one I hadn't anticipated but was grateful for. My relationship with Alex remained transformed. There was no longer that undercurrent of judgment between us, and he began showing a genuine interest in my life. Our conversations were no longer just about kids, marriage, or career, those old standards of success, but instead about what truly made each of us feel fulfilled. It wasn't always easy for him to shift his thinking, but with every conversation, I could see him growing. What was most striking, though, was how the ripple effect of what I had done, standing up to Alex, setting boundaries, and claiming my space, had impacted the rest of the family. After Thanksgiving, family dynamics began to shift. For the first time in years, there were no comments about when I was finally going to settle down, and no one pressured me to take the next step that seemed to be expected of every woman in our family. There was a newfound understanding and respect for personal choice, and for the first time, I felt seen for who I really was. Not as someone who was lacking because I didn't follow the traditional path, but as a whole, complete person with my own aspirations and definition of happiness. One Saturday afternoon, as I met up with my cousin Rachel for coffee, I could sense that the conversation was about to go deeper. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, Rachel began, her voice hesitant, about how you've built your life on your terms. I guess I've been struggling with the idea of living up to expectations, mine and everyone else's. I thought having a family was going to fix everything, but sometimes it just feels heavy. I raised an eyebrow. Rachel, who had always been the one with the picture-perfect life, was admitting that things weren't as idyllic as they seemed. Rachel, I said gently, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to live up to anyone else's expectations. You just have to find what works for you, what truly makes you happy. She smiled, a little relieved. I think I've been so focused on the right way to do things that I forgot what my way is. I've been so consumed by the idea of what people expect from me that I never really asked myself what I wanted. We spent the next hour talking about our childhood, the pressures we felt growing up, and the ways we had both tried to conform to other people's ideals. I didn't try to offer advice, I just listened, something I had learned to do more of lately. I didn't have the answers for her, and I didn't need to. But it felt good to know that by standing up for myself, I had opened the door for others in my family to start questioning their own choices. I had given Rachel the space to ask herself the hard questions, to reconsider what it meant to live authentically. As I left the cafe that afternoon, I realized that I had not only stood up for myself, but had sparked a shift in the entire family's thinking. What I had done wasn't just about me defending my choices. It was about showing everyone that they had the power to define their own happiness too. That no one, no matter their relationship to you, should be able to dictate what your life should look like. Months passed, and the change was more than just a shift in family dynamics. It was a shift in me. I'd become someone who no longer apologized for my choices, who didn't feel the need to explain myself or justify my life to anyone. I had taken control of my happiness, and in doing so, I had inspired others to do the same. Alex and I continued to have more open and honest conversations. One evening, he called me just to check in. "Oi, hey Jenna," he said casually, but there was a warmth in his voice. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I've been talking to Sarah about what you said the other night, about how we don't always need to fit into some mold. And honestly, it's made me see things differently." I couldn't help but smile. This was the Alex I'd been hoping to connect with, the one who was capable of reflection, growth, and vulnerability. "I'm glad to hear that, Alex. It wasn't just about me needing to be right. It was about me wanting to be heard. I hope you found peace with your own decisions, too." "I have," he admitted. "It's just hard sometimes to shake off the idea that I've got to follow this certain path, but I'm learning, I really am." In that moment, I felt a sense of pride not just for myself, but for him too. It wasn't easy for Alex to admit he didn't have it all figured out, but it was a start. And that, I realized, was a victory in its own right. A few months later, our family gathered again for a milestone birthday celebration. This time, there was no awkwardness, no stifled comments about my life choices. Alex, now more supportive and understanding, didn't bring up kids or marriage once. Instead, he asked about my career, my travels, and the things that made me happy. It was the first time in years that I felt fully accepted, without any conditions or judgments. As the evening drew to a close, Alex pulled me aside. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said sincerely, "for opening my eyes. I never realized how much I was projecting my own insecurities onto you. I'm proud of you, Jenna. I hope you know that." I smiled at him, feeling the weight of everything we had both been through. "Thank you, Alex. I'm proud of you too." And just like that, our relationship had come full circle. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't always be smooth sailing, but the foundation had been rebuilt, stronger than before. This wasn't just about me and Alex anymore. It was about the entire family learning to live authentically, to stop trying to fit into someone else's mold, and to respect each other's choices, no matter how different they might be. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had transpired, the confrontation, the apologies, the slow but steady healing. And I realized that standing up for myself, speaking my truth, and demanding respect wasn't just a lesson for Alex. It was a lesson for everyone in the family. And most importantly, it was a lesson I had taught myself. The lesson was simple. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my happiness, and no one would ever make me feel less than again. The life I was living was the one I had chosen for myself, and that was the most powerful thing I could have ever learned. I was finally free.